Good morning, my friends. We're happy to have made it to Friday. And this is Mary Lee Nunley with United Stroke Alliance at our corporate office in Peoria, Illinois, where it is a cloudy, hazy. Hey, my mom is watching. She's got an orchid sitting on her windowsill. Good morning, Mom.
Hey.
So that means Mom's okay and I'm okay. I don't have to call you now.
Just checked in.
Anyway, I'm here with Genny Gibs, and you know United Stroke Alliance is about the prevention, awareness, and recovery from stroke. So we're going to get right to it. I'm going to quickly plug in the microphone, and Genny is going to talk all about orchids. Hi, Cheryl. Oh, Cheryl Johnson's on here from Florida.
Oh, boy.
Okay, let's get you mic'd up. Take it.
Carol from Florida, I'll bet you're already an expert on orchids, aren't you? Because they're all over the place there. You lucky duck. Well, orchids, holy cow. Can you believe there are 25,000 varieties of orchids that we have identified? Some are naturally occurring, and some of them have been hybridized by humans. But they're kind of the plant of mystique. You know, you may have heard of the tulipomania. Well, has been through many years an orchid-omania, in which, with the history of them, especially back in the Victorian era, it got to be this great big status symbol, because you have probably seen these beautiful Victorian homes, and they have a lovely little conservatory on one side or the back of them where they sit and have their tea, and they're sitting amongst the orchids. And the hunt for a new and unusual orchid became a really big thing in the Victorian era, and some of these wealthy people sponsored the plant explorers, as I call them, and they would go to South America and Africa, and they would climb the mountains, and they would go down the Amazon and everywhere to find a new variety of orchid. And of course, the guy who put the money up for it got his name put on it, no doubt. So but I don't know if we're really looking that hard for so many of them now or not. First of all, I would like to point out my lovely Cattleya orchid earrings that were my grandmother's, that she got in Hawaii many, many years ago. So they're a lot of fun. I think I have the world's largest collection of botanical jewelry and t-shirts. But so the orchids are just a plant of mystique. You know, that they're romantic, they have practical use, all kinds of neat things. But I'd like to start out by showing some lovely pictures. I tried really, really hard to get some different varieties of orchids. Well, I should probably start with these live ones we have. Is the one that your mom has, that's a moth orchid, isn't it? Okay. Phalaenopsis moth orchid. This is a teeny cute little miniature one, and these are the regular standard size ones. And look at the inside parts of those. Aren't those interesting? All those parts have a purpose in them. So these are the moth orchids, Phalaenopsis. And this one, it's a little worse for wear, but that is the Cattleya orchid. And I couldn't find one that was a little newer. But this is the one that, first of all, defines the smell purple.
Okay.
This is what purple smells like, is this one. And of course, you may remember Mother's Day corsages.
Oh, back in the day.
That's what we all had back then, absolutely. So they last pretty long and smell fabulous. Some orchids have lots of scent, some don't. But let me show you some pictures, and we'll talk about some of these. This is another Cattleya orchid, and these are mostly a tropical area orchid, and they can be either terrestrial, growing in a pot or on the ground, or some of them can be like an aerial. They'll grow on a tree. Epiphytes, meaning that they live just on the air, that they don't have to be in soil. Their roots just kind of cling on to the bark of a tree.
The video I watched preparing had one of those, and it was fascinating. It was growing on a tree. It was beautiful, yeah.
And they usually have to be in a humid area. That makes sense, doesn't it? So the Cattleyas come in so many different colors. It's every color of the rainbow. They say that there is no true black orchid, but we're going to look at that a little later here. Now this is one of the lady slipper orchids, and these are all over the world, and there are some of these in cold regions. They say the only continent that does not have orchids is Antarctica. But if I were working in Antarctica, I would have some potted ones imported and have them in my office or home there in Antarctica. But this is one of the lady slipper.
Cheryl just said there's lots of orchids down in Florida.
Oh, I'll bet. I would love to see them. I bet it's beautiful right now. Lucky duck. So, so this is one of the lady slipper types, which are usually kind of somewhat of a smaller one, and they don't get real tall, but they're very hardy ones. This is one that lives even in Indiana. This picture was taken in northern Indiana, and they're in Minnesota. They're a woodland type that if you're going through the forest sometime and you may see a different color, they can be pink, white, yellow, orange, purple, and they're kind of delicate and all, but they're an interesting configuration with that little pocket down in there. I think that probably catches water, and who knows, maybe some insects that will dissolve and they can absorb. But it's nice to know that they're not only tropical. You can have them in lots of different places. This is one of my favorites. Is it your favorite too, Mary Lee?
Well, I found it fascinating.
No doubt. You may have seen this picture on Facebook or somewhere on the internet. I'm not even sure of the exact name of this one, but many orchids are very anatomical looking. And if you look at this one closely, you may see that it resembles a naked man. So that's how we found it, was by Googling naked man orchid. But say every parts of these have a reason for them, and so hopefully you can see that he's got a nice little face. He's got arms and legs and other parts to him, if you can see it.
Okay.
So.
Actually, it's a beautiful. The color it's actually a beautiful.
And the spots on it and everything are just gorgeous. He looks very happy. Ta-da! So. One of my favorites is Cymbidium, and if you remember going to prom, you may have had Cymbidiums on either your corsage or your wrist corsage. These are a neat one because some varieties grow upwards, the stem does, and some of them cascade over beautifully. So there's a lot of different ways they can grow, and this comes in a lot of different colors too, and it lasts ages and ages and ages. So if you're looking for a nice orchid plant to have at home, besides the easy to grow and maintain moth orchid, the Cymbidium is another nice one. I do not know the common name of this one. You know, all orchids, of course, have a botanical name, you know, like the Phalaenopsis, but the common name is moth orchid. But I couldn't find common names for all of the botanical names of orchids. So a lot of them, as we say, were named after the person who paid for their discovery or the discoverer, possibly. But Bulbophyllum bicolor, there are reasons it's called there. I like this one. This is a tropical one because it looks like it's reaching out to hug. I would call this the hugging orchid if it were mine. You can see how it's kind of got its arms down there and hugging you. Very, very cozy that way. Now, orchids have inspired so much art, literature. If you're a fan of Georgia O'Keeffe artwork, she's done a lot of orchid pictures, and they're very beautiful colors of different kinds. So look up Georgia O'Keeffe and see what artwork you can see by her. Here's a bizarre one. You know, we said no black orchids. Supposedly dark, dark, dark purple. Now that does look like a bat, does it not?
It does. That's beautiful.
Yes, very cool. I like that one. If I could find one of these, I would grow it. But I think they might be hard to find. Now here's one that has inspired a book and a movie. If you're a fan of Nicolas Cage, he was in this movie of, what was it, the Lost Orchid or Stolen Orchid, something like that. And it's called A Ghost Orchid. And you in Florida, Cheryl, this is native to Florida, and it is very, very rare, and it is protected species, and people have gone to prison, not just jail, but prison, for hunting these and stealing them out of the Everglades and places in Florida. And so the Nicolas Cage movie is an interesting one about thieves and the federal agents who are tracking down the thieves of these, because we don't want them to go away. They are beautiful. White frog orchid, you can see, kind of looks like little frog legs there. Wouldn't it be fun to get to name plants yourself after looking at them? But a very rare and unusual orchid. Now this is called a bee orchid. And the neat thing about some orchids is that either through their form, their shape, their colors, or their fragrance, they attract the pollinator that pollinates them. And this one, not only in the face of it, underneath that bee, looks like a bee, it sends out the pheromone of bees to attract the male bee to it, thinking he's going to have a good time with the lady bee, and winds up spreading the pollen all over the place. So
Okay. Education at its finest.
isn't nature amazing?
Nature is amazing.
And tricky too.
Uh-huh.
So draws them in and makes them work.
Okay.
This was called the ugliest orchid. I feel kind of sorry for it. I think it's an interesting one. I don't know how well you can see it on there, but it looks like this screaming face with little teeth in it, like somebody's hurting it. And the mottled colors, some people would consider ugly. I kind of like it. But it is nominated and voted to be the world's ugliest orchid. Say it survives on fungus. So there you go.
There you go.
Something unusual. But so with the different orchids, different legends and lore of different cultures. First of all, you may be eating an orchid every day and you don't even know it, because vanilla is an orchid. The vanilla beans are from an orchid, which I couldn't find to bring, but they grow in this part of it here that will develop into the seeds of the orchid. So if you're putting vanilla in your desserts and everything, you are eating an orchid plant. Cool, huh? A lot of people use orchids to decorate salads and cakes. Every part of the orchid is actually edible. So, and they're not harmful to your pets, anything like that. So if you want to make something pretty, in some places, of course, in some of the Asian cultures and the Ayurvedic medicines, they use anything for medicine, and a lot of orchid parts are used for medicine in Asian cultures. And one of the other legend types of things is if a woman is expecting a child, if she eats the flowers of an orchid, she will have a girl. If she eats this part of the orchid, she will have a boy child. Interesting. I'm not sure how they figure that one out.
That could be an old legend that's not scientifically proven.
I don't think so, unless there's something hormonal in those, who knows. But you can see why orchids are so important, culinary, different things, and the inspiration, as I say, they have inspired art, music. There are, pardon me, music about orchids. There's a Frank Sinatra song, and Benny Goodman music. A lot of big bands era, for some reason, seem to compose songs about orchids, strangely enough. So clicked on those and listened to them for a while the other day, and they're always very romantic. So maybe they were more romantic in that big band era and that. And if you watch some of those movies from the 40s and 50s, and you often see the chanteuse singing, and she usually has a big orchid in her hair.
Yes, that's right.
You know, Billie Holiday and that had the big orchid in the hair. So, pardon me. We were talking about adding the orchids to food and things for medicine. The dendrobium orchid, which is very similar to our little moth orchid here, is now used in workout supplements to build up stronger muscular tissue and give you more energy. I don't know if I'm going to go home and eat some of those and see if I have more energy rather than using caffeine, possibly. I don't know. But there, of course, is no scientific evidence to prove it. But those workout people think it works. So, well, let's talk a minute then about the potting and repotting
What
of.
we have here. Yes.
I'm probably going to make a mess. First of all, I know some of you have read about and used the ice cube method. You used that, didn't you, Mary Lee? Yeah, and it was successful for you. If you are using that ice cube method, it's important to make sure the ice cube is not touching your roots or leaves.
Okay, we're going to answer a question.
Oh, good.
A question just popped up. Vivian says she got one for Valentine's Day. How does she care for it? So are you going to cover that now?
Yes, we are.
Okay, Viv, stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
All right.
First of all, it's probably not going to need to be repotted for quite a while, so don't do that. But it probably requires high humidity, which, winter furnaces, the air is kind of dry. So you might want to take a saucer with stones, pebbles in it, and keep some moisture in that. But you don't want the roots to sit in moisture.
The expert that I watched on YouTube said to do that. Put a tray underneath with stones and keep those damp,
Yep.
but not let the roots stay damp.
Well,
You
there
are as smart as a YouTuber.
By golly, maybe I'll do
Jenny's
some
as
YouTube
smart as a
myself.
YouTuber.
Oh, I feel what's the word I want here? Well, verified anyway. So we're going to look at these. Here's some of the kind of old-fashioned pots that are used for orchids, and they have all that on them because it gives good drainage. And it's important to not get water in the stems and the leaf axils, that type of thing, because it'll rot them very easily. But you can very easily rot your orchids too. But I love these big old heavy clay pots like that. But if you can't find those, any plastic pot will do, with lots of holes in the bottom or the sides for good drainage. So I'm going to make a mess here, but we're going to talk about, I have this orchid bark here. This is a little finer texture than what you normally see, but it is really important for orchid roots to have good drainage. There you go. You can see that well. And that has, the Vanna of soil. And so, some orchid mixes have bigger chunks of bark in them, and if you're going to use those, sometimes you don't know what you're getting until you open the bag, but you might want to add some other soil in with that, and something with good drainage, with the sphagnum peat and the perlite and that type of thing in it, to still encourage good drainage. This is sphagnum moss, and this is kind of like what some of the terrestrial orchids grow on the trees. And if you want to start growing some of these, you can take some of this, especially if it's the long fiber, sphagnum moss, and attach it to a little board or
Hold that up again. I didn't get a good.
or
People can see
Yes.
sphagnum. There we go.
SPHAGNUM, moss. And anyway, you can either wire a bunch of this to a chunk of bark or a board, chicken wire, something like that, but also attach your orchid to that. And with this then, with your terrestrial orchids, a mister is a good way to water those. So it'll drip, so you'll want to have something underneath of it. But if you like to try those really different terrestrial ones that are so gorgeous, that would be a good use of those.
Very nice.
All right, I'm going to make a mess here. This beautiful one here is sticking way too far out of the pot. They really want to be potted covering the roots up. So, fortunately, I have this lovely fellow. And if you remember when we were doing spring potting, we covered the hole, and while this needs drainage, I probably would rather do this with a paper towel that's a little more porous. But here's the roots of this. And these roots, if they are brown and dried out looking, we're going to cut them off because they're not doing any good at all. So we're going to get rid of some of those. They're not helpful. They're just taking up space and causing fungal problems.
I think we always get worried about, we think the roots are so precious we have to save every single one.
Nope. See this one here?
Okay.
There's that.
I guess that was the answer.
Yeah.
Nope.
And like I say, they could get kind of fungusy, and that can spread to the other roots, and that's not good. So I'm going to trim these off, get rid of those bad boys, because they're not doing any good. Lop it off if it's not being helpful. So that one's all dried out because it was sitting way up above the soil even. Some experts say don't do the ice cube thing, but you know what? If it works for you, go with it, you know?
I have kind of abandoned the ice cube method for a weekly visit with a little 3-ounce cup, like those little cups you use in the bathroom.
Yes.
So that I know I'm limiting the amount, and that's about as much as 2 ice cubes would be.
That sounds smart. Well, here's something to see. I don't know how well you can see that tiny little thing coming out there, but that is the real root here. And this covering of them protects it, but the tricky part of that is that moisture can go through this covering, but it can't come out. It's a one-way door. And so this is one reason that you might overwater easily. So, and they can survive fine. I wouldn't recommend going around pulling these off of all of them, but just kind of a little botanical interest thing, but it's kind of cool. I'm not sure how it is that the water can go in but not come out. So one-way door thing. So I'm going to get rid of most of these bad roots. And something too, when you go to the store and you see this beautiful blue orchid. Orchids do not come in blue.
Okay.
I'm sorry, anything that looks bluish in natural may be actually purple, but when you get these beautiful moth orchids that look bright blue and they're gorgeous and cool, and then those flowers die back and you cut back that stem. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but the next stem that comes up
Will not be blue.
they won't be blue. They're going to be white, because they have been injected in the stem after the blooms start with a blue dye. And if you are looking at those and you see a little puncture wound in the side of it, they have shot blue dye in there. And so if you don't mind it turning white later, or not turning white, but the newer blooms being white, you're okay with that. So we've got the majority of these yucky ones off of there. That's a technical term, yucky ones.
It's a botanical term.
Yes. Yucky! And I'm going to put all new,
Orchid mix.
yes, I'm going to put new mix in it and say this one's pretty solidish. It doesn't have a lot of huge, big chunks in it. A lot of them have bigger chunks of pine bark, but the important thing is to make sure this is setting fairly low and doesn't have a lot of exposed roots. I know sometimes you'll get an orchid with the roots growing outside of the pot or coming through the holes, and those should be snipped off. So I'm not going to add any peat and perlite and that kind of stuff to this. but we're giving it a bigger, deeper pot. Thank you. Thank you, Vanna. You know, while I'm doing this, Vanna, would you care to tell them and show about what you learned about cutting the stem, where to cut it?
I'm assuming they'll pick me, your microphone will pick me up.
Okay, I'll lean over there.
Well, in preparation, I always like to know, I learned so darn much with these. I watched a couple of videos, and I was curious how you get them to bloom. And the horticulturist that I watched has gotten them to rebloom a lot. I've had some rebloom, but it was quite happenstance. It's like we thought it was not going to do anything, and all of a sudden a new stem came up. But often people, he said, will like when this bloom dies, they cut it off at the base. And he said these little nodules that are here, I don't know, that's a scientific term, I'm sure. That if you can leave 4 of those, cut it off above that is a good way for it to encourage rebloom. So I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I know they all do have those little nodules. That one shows up a little bit better. So I don't know.
Well, and temperature has a lot to do with it.
You did talk about that.
Yes.
Not too hot, not too cold.
Yeah, and I find that the orchids in the greenhouse there wind up blooming better in the winter. They've got cooler temperatures, and the daylight hours, of course, are shorter in the winter, and it doesn't seem to affect them adversely. But I think the temperature is the most important thing. So if you've got a new one that you receive for Valentine's Day, if you could put it in a fairly cool area that gets good light, that would be very helpful for it.
They said they don't like direct sun. Is that correct?
Correct,
okay.
Yeah. So a north window or maybe an east window where they get morning sun and then shade the rest of the day, indirect light would be the best for it. Now
Okay,
this
so
is...
now our little buddy is all...
Yep.
Okay, so
And
he's good to go now,
He's
right?
good to go. I'll be anxious to see if he blooms anytime soon. It's going to take him a while, though, to get those roots adjusted to all of that. So we'll keep an eye on it.
Now, as far as watering this little friend,
Yes. Well, it likes well drained. You know, it wants some moisture, but it wants to be well drained. And we have good holes in this pot to help with that. And so you don't want to keep it soaked. You don't want to water it every day, like you said, about once a week or so. And that would be sufficient. It's more likely to die from overwatering than it is from underwatering.
okay.
So, any other questions then?
No, nothing else has appeared. If anybody's got a question, put it in. We'll try and answer it.
I'll try to let you know when this blooms next.
We'll report back.
Yes.
We'll report back.
Yes, we will. So, very
Okay,
good.
Well, thank you so very much.
Gladly, it's been fun.
I would like for you just real quickly, I know we don't have details about next month, but talk about what you're planning to do next month so everybody can kind of be prepared for that.
It's going to be a tag team of Kelly and I working on Kelly's house plants. Some of them need to be repotted, some of them need to be cut back. A couple of them need to be thrown out and become one with the earth as compost. And so we're going to go do a little shopping for new pots for them, and we'll bring that all in and we'll work on them together and show you what you can do with your houseplants now.
Okay. Linda Gavin is watching.
There's a
There he is. There he is. There he is.
Anything to add, Linda?
Okay, well, as always, Jenny, thank you so very much for joining us this morning. I'm going to talk about what's up for next week. I'm very excited about Monday. I have a Zoom meeting with 4 students, physical therapy and occupational therapy students, in just a little while, about a half an hour. And they are going to partner for the next 3 months, once a month, to do a Facebook Live on a different topic. And Monday, their topic is, let me make sure I say it exactly right, don't give up on therapy. No matter what, don't give up on therapy. So they're going to talk about that. We're going to do some adaptive equipment at a later one. How long does it Cheryl wants to know, how long does it take to rebloom an orchid? We don't know.
It depends on your moisture.
It depends on the moisture, the
sunlight,
light, the temperature. Because we had one, my mom had one, and she just stuck it in her bedroom it was a north window sill. And she was about ready to give up on it, and she kept forgetting to water it, and all of a sudden it did bloom again.
Don't give up on therapy.
So don't give up on therapy. There we go. On Wednesday, I will have a nurse practitioner, Kay Nichols, and she is from Indiana, I believe. She's with a hospital system. She's going to talk about AFib and devices, internal versus external devices, and a little bit about AFib and the link with AFib and stroke. So I'm very excited about that for Wednesday. She and I are going to Zoom tomorrow to get everything in order. And then next Friday, I'm just going to talk a little bit about some things, if you are a caregiver, some things that you might want to think about preparing to survive the marathon that is possibly ahead of you. So that's what we've got going on for the next week. Good morning, Larry.
Good morning.
So that's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. So thanks again to Jenny, our horticulturist, and she'll see you again next month. And have a great day.